The Nordic cooperation works on many levels and on many different topics. The work has the overall responsibility for this cooperation that has been going on for very many years lies with the Nordic prime ministers. The Council of Ministers, that is the coordinating body, was set up in 1971, and you might think like the Council of Europe that it's just a one council, but actually that's just a collective name for many. There are 11 ministerial councils actually working. The work is done on many levels, and the cooperation has developed, for example, in the sense that there is a presidency, very much like in the European Union. If you come from the European Union, from a member state, you know that we have a rotating presidency. In the Nordic cooperation, it's the same. And that actually means that for a one-year period, one of the Nordic countries will chair the meetings, organize events, and also has the possibility to set an agenda, a couple of topics or issues that is specifically of interest to that country. And then that goes on to be followed up by the next year's presidency, who then in turn can introduce one or two more topics. This way, the idea is, amongst other things, that the work has relevance for a national context, that there are nationally interesting things that can then be developed jointly on the Nordic level. Here you see a short list of where the presidencies have lied in the last couple of years, so that you get an idea of the rotation. Within the education sector, the Nordic network or the Nordic cooperation works in three strategic areas, as you can see: education, research, and language. The Nordic Network for Adult Learning is primarily supporting the development of policy and practice within Nordic adult learning. What we want to do in NVL, where my name is Johanni Larienko, work as a national coordinator in Finland, and I have colleagues in all the other Nordic countries, is to further develop existing forms of cooperation, build on what is already there, and then also pick up on the presidencies of the Nordic cooperation, of interests, issues, of trends that emerges, making them part of the cooperation that we do. So both build on what we have and also sniff out and be sensitive to and flexible to react to new things and expectations that come in from various sectors, where education is seen as a possible partner or something that can play a role or do a job. So let me go to the next slide. What happens now, what is currently interesting for you to know if you don't know it from before right now, is that the Nordic cooperation has been defined in terms of a Vision 2030 that guides everything that we should be doing in all sectors in the Nordic levels, in the Nordic cooperation. This Vision 2030 has three strategic priorities. And when you hear the presentation of GRALE in a few minutes, then it might be worthwhile to reflect on how these two interact and where are the crossing points, where are there similarities, and where are there not. This, especially for those of you looking and listening from the Nordic countries or to this webinar today, because this vision will have quite an impact on the work we do and the things that we try to accomplish or will try to accomplish in the Nordic cooperation setting. The vision has three levels, and they're all identifiable to be related to, or they're all jointly coming together to create the vision that you can see in the middle, the most sustainable and integrated region in the world. So sustainability is the new, really heavily emphasized topic. Everything that we do within Nordic corporations for the foreseeable future should be connected to sustainability issues. But, and this is very important, it is not related to sustainability in terms of climate change or climate alone. As you can see, in this understanding of sustainability are three levels. So by looking at how we can create a competitive Nordic region using the opportunities that comes up with the green economy, you see that it is more of also creating jobs and a new kind of society. When you look at the aspect of the one in the bottom right, a socially sustainable Nordic region, that relates to, it doesn't help us to have a society where we have jobs and where we have green economy, but the citizens of the region are not integrated or participating at all. And neither of the competitiveness or the socially sustainable aspects are worth very much unless we also take into consideration care for climate change and what we can and should be doing in relation to that. So those are the guiding principles for how the Nordic cooperation work in education, but also in all other sectors of Nordic cooperation are guided. This is a super short presentation, but I just wanted to give you an idea about what is NVL and how and why are we working currently. And what we try to do is connect the Nordic level and these three aspects or dimensions also to the extent possible and to the extent we're able to with European level policies and suggestions, visions, and obviously, and of course, also to UNESCO and to the GRALE report, which is what we will turn to next. So I will stop my presentation because this was my last slide. And we will now go over to Samah Shalaby from UEL in Hamburg, who will give us the presentation of the GRALE report. The GRALE 4 report, that indicates something. It's not the first, third, second or third, it's actually number 4 already. So there is quite a bulk of information, and you will now get the very latest on the number 4 report, which came out recently, I think in December, if I remember correctly. But if I'm wrong, someone will correct me. So,
no, absolutely
yes.
Right. Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank you for giving me this opportunity to also to launch on GRALE 4. And as you are rightly said that we have launched GRALE 4 in December 2019. This was a global launch. And actually what we are doing right now that we are preparing for also regional launches and also regional reports based on the data of the GRALE 4. And thank you also for your introduction about the work of NVL, because it gives us a nice opportunity as well to see that the role of adult learning and education also to somehow to achieve the 3 dimensions that you have mentioned in your presentation. I just keep it short and then I will go directly to my presentation on the GRALE 4. I assume some of you have heard already or know about the global report on adult learning and education, which is GRALE. I'm just sharing my presentation, just a second. So yes, as you said that this is the 4th global report on adult learning and education. And it's good to say that actually we have the report every 3 years. And each issue of this report has a thematic topic. For this year, actually, we chose for GRALE 4, the thematic topic is on participation, equity, and inclusion, and it was published in 2019. But I have to say that actually the time of the reporting, because we are collecting data from 2016 to 2018. And we were very glad that this GRALE 4, actually, we had a response from 159 countries all over the world. So it counts for almost 80% of the GRALE 4 survey response. It's actually for us very remarkable because this is maybe one of the highest participation rate comparing with other grades. So for example, in GRALE 4, we had 139, and also comparing to GRALE 4, then we see there's increase in the number of participation of the countries. Here in this table, actually, it gives us the participation per region, how many countries participated from each region. And we see, of course, there is a variation in the participation, but of course, there's high number in the total.
Samah, before you go further, can you switch to presenter view in the PowerPoint, because
Sure.
if people have a small screen, it might be a little bit hard with the numbers to see it.
Sure, thank you for this. I hope now it's better.
Yes, thank you, perfect.
Yes, thank you. Very good. So maybe we can just give you briefly how we collect data in GRALE 4. Actually, we are basically, we have our tool, which is a GRALE 4 survey, which is developed by UIL, or UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning. So we send this survey to all the member states, and the member states actually, they nominate a focal point who is responsible for giving data for the survey. So this is actually our tool, and this is somehow how we collect the data from the countries. And this data helps us actually to track the development in adult learning and education. Specifically, we use two dimensions for this collecting data. We have our frameworks, which is the Belém framework for action, and also recommendation on adult learning and education. So in our survey, we track the development on adult learning and education in the 5 areas of action for the Belém framework of action. As you see here in the small cycles, the policy, the governance, participation, finance, and quality. But also, we track the development in the 3 fields of learning. This here in the big cycle, which is the literacy and basic skills, continuing training and professional development, and citizenship. So here are the basis for our survey and for the questions and how we are tracking the development on adult learning and education. Actually, from the GRALE 4, we can see that there are main or key messages that can conclude the development in adult learning and education. What we have seen, and we will go in details later, that the participation in adult learning and education is uneven across all the regions and across the countries. Also, the poor data still make a huge constraint concerning the tracking the progress. We have noticed, and this also we will say it later about the poor data, that not the data for adult learning and education for certain groups are not sufficient or are not available to make us track in a proper way the development for this certain groups. The third thing is the policy or the progress in the policy and the governance are good, but still are not sufficient to unlock the potential of adult learning and education. And the major constraints are still remaining with funding on financing the adult learning and education. Also, the quality of adult learning and education, there is a progress, but still not enough. But maybe the good news that about the participation, because this is also our focus for GRALE 4, that the women participation has been increased from the, in the reporting period from 2016 to 2018, there was an increase in the women participation, but still there is a deep inequalities in other groups. That's also, we will see it later. All to say that actually adult learning education has a major role to achieve the SDGs. So that's why maybe we see this report as a wake-up call for countries also to take or to make adult learning education in the center of their efforts. So here we can see more in the tables what happened in the overall change rate in adult learning education. Actually, there is around 57% of the countries reported there is an increase in the participation rate of adult learning and education. However, there are still 9% saying there is no increase or actually decrease. And other countries stayed on the same level. What we have said in the key message is that the participation is uneven and not equal for all the regions. And this is also what we can see here from the numbers, that the regions are not the same in reporting increase or stays the same or decrease. But actually what GRALE 4 was very interested in, that to collect actual data. So we're also looking for the quality of the data. That's why the GRALE 4 asked the countries if this participation rates are based on actual figures. So actually there are around 96 of the countries provided actual figures of participation rate. And we can see here, actually, there are variation with the participation rate within the countries based on actual figures. So if we, for example, we see Central and Eastern European countries, we can see that actually 29% reported that the participation rate, it's around, it's from 1 or less than 3%. And we can see also that 36% of in the same region said that the participation rate based on actual figure, it's not more than or less than 10%. And none of the countries in this region said that the participation rate is more than 50%. So if you take this an example and you compare with other regions, you see there is a lot of variation, and let's say there is no common figure or no common background from this figure. So that's why it's uneven. As we mentioned, that the poor data is still a major barrier, because from what we have noticed in GRALE 4, that actually there are some countries they don't have enough information on participation. As you see that 46 countries, they don't have data on participation. This is in general, but also in particularly for some certain groups. For example, the vulnerable groups and the disadvantaged groups, some countries, they were not able to give data on this participation rate of these groups, which make us also limited somehow to track the development on the participation of this group and also the impact of ALE for these groups. So to conclude that the GRALE 4 actually that give the message that the high investment is needed actually to collect and to monitor data of participation. If we go and now for the second area of the BLIM framework of action, which is policy, we will find that there is a progress also in the policy of adult learning and education. 66% of countries, they said that they have made progress. However, the policy is a very wide area of action. So that's why we break it down into different categories. So to see that what happened in the development of the policies, but also in the implementation of policies and implementation of legislation, as well as involving stakeholders in the development and the implementation of the policies and plans for adult learning and education. So here also we can see that the highest rate of response by countries, that 86% of the countries said that they have made progress in involving stakeholders in the development and the implementation of policies, which is gives a good sign indeed that there is a kind of comprehensive maybe or holistic view in developing the adult learning and education policies. However, and also there is a high rate in developing plans, like 82% of the countries said that we have developed plans for adult learning and education. But when we look, we see less progress made in implementation of the policies and less progress in implementing legislations. However, also actually the validation of non-formal education and informal learning also received a minor attention in this progress. And here it allows also for, let's say, comparative view, where you can see the change in the policy within the regions. Of course, policy and governance are, let's say, speaking to each other, because also governance is very important for policy implementation, but also important for the provision of adult learning and education. So we see here also the countries made progress in the governance, like 70% of the countries globally made progress in this. More specifically, the progress or the highest progress in the governance as we can see, it happened here in the strengthened cooperation with the civil society, 40%, and also increased stakeholder participation. However, we see that the ALE did not become more decentralized. So it's only 33% of the countries said that ALE become more decentralized since 2016. So actually here also the increase the stakeholder participation 50% is the highest rate of progress in governance that countries made. But all to say that of course governance is has shown that it's very important that the stakeholders should be involved in adult learning and education, especially in the time of the crisis where we are facing now, because that every participant or every stakeholder has a role to play. And actually, I think this time more than ever, that we need every stakeholder of adult learning education to be on board, just to make ALE more responsive and also to make it responsive and also to addressing the needs of the people and to overcome the challenges and to increase the knowledge and awareness of adults who are part of the societies. Therefore, I will just break here for maybe a work group and we go for the questions.
Before we go there, you have one clarifying question. Perhaps you can help us. The question is on the policy slide regarding validation. The percentage there, does it mean to have a policy or implementing a policy? Are you able to respond on that?
Actually, here it's to have a policy.
It is to have a policy. Yes. Okay, great, thank you.
Thanks.
Then you can go to the question slide.
I'll just go again for the presentation view.
Yes.
So, yeah, based on the figures that we given now for, sorry, yes.
Yes. So if you stop the sharing, I will also give this question to the groups. So what we would like to do now is we would like to put you in randomly selected smaller groups of 3 to 4 people.
Thank you. I was also a part of the group work and I was really finding it very interesting to discuss. So now we're gonna move forward. We have, before the break, we discussed already about the policy and the governance, and we saw that on a global level, what is the improvement in this area based on the data from GRALE. Now we are going to move to other area, which is the finance, and what's happened with the finance. Sorry. Yes, and what's just open the. Yes, now. So now we're going to move for the ALE financing, and we see on a global level what is the improvement on the ALE financing. As we mentioned that the ALE financing remain one of the actually low area with the progress comparing to the others. So GRALE 4 found that ALE is remain unfunded, and this is actually based on the figures that we got, that 90% of the countries spend less than 0.5 of the budget on ALE education. Yes, here in this figure, we can see that actually ALE as a percentage of public education expenditure, we can find only 90% or 19% of the countries spend 0.5%. And then 14% of the countries, they spend almost 2% on adult learning education as part of the total expenditure. While in total on a globally level, almost 20 countries that only reported on spending more than 4% or more than 4% on adult learning and education. So this indication gives us that ALE remain unfunded in many countries, and also give us another indication that actually the countries did not meet their commitment to raise the fund for adult learning and education. Comparing to GRALE 3, almost 58 countries said that they are going to increase the spending on adult learning education. But when we compare it to GRALE 4, we find this is really didn't happen, and aid remained unfunded in many countries. Actually, now it's the quality, and this is also one of the areas of the Belém Framework of Action that GRALE 4 monitored closely. And we find that the quality in adult learning education improved, of course. 57% of the countries said there is an improvement, but the quality also, it's a very wide area where you can find the quality of the curricula, you find the quality of the learning materials, and also the quality of the teachers and the facilitators. So in order to capture these different areas of the quality, the GRALE 4 also has looked closely in these areas or disaggregated areas, as you can see on the left side here, like developing quality criteria for curricula and also learning materials. But also we looked at the quality developed in the learning fields of the RAIL, of the recommendation of adult learning education. We saw that actually the literacy and the basic skills witnessed the highest improvement in the quality comparing to the other areas, which is the continuing training and also citizenship education. So for example, here you can see that in the developing the quality criteria for learning materials, that the literacy skills, almost 59% of the countries said that they have been made progress in this area. When you compare it with the other fields of learning, like continuing training and also active citizenship, we will find that really active citizenship did not witness any or very, very minor progress comparing to the other fields of learning. So moving from quality and what happened in the quality of literacy and basic skills, we will go again to the participation to see how the participation improved. We actually said at the beginning that there is an improvement in the participation of adult learning education, particularly for women. There was almost 59% of the countries said that we have made progress in the participation rate of women in the adult learning and education. However, still there are still many inequalities when it comes to different groups, or let's say the vulnerable groups or the disadvantaged groups. As you can see here from the figure that actually for example, we see that the women are the highest, but let's see for the migrants and the refugees, 41% of the countries said that there is a progress in this area or in this the participation for this group. But we see, for example, the older adults or adults with disabilities, they have witnessed or there's less participation rate for these groups. And this is, we can relate it back actually to the data, because many countries, as we said at the beginning, they don't have enough data for these groups. So actually the data makes a very play a major role here in order to track the progress, but also to find the remaining challenges that we can address in the future for these groups, in order also to enhance their participation in the future. So here, giving you the overall figure or also the global perspective and development in the funding and also the participation, we would like to break again into a group, and then we find out also from your perspective what are the strategies that are needed to increase the aid financing, but also we think from your perspective if the technology can play a major role to reduce these inequalities, especially for the vulnerable groups and the disadvantaged groups. So welcome back to the main room again. And again, I was lucky to be also to have a nice discussion and very fruitful, and to learn from other experiences. So now, as we mentioned briefly, also about the global development of the adult learning and education in the 5 areas that are concerning the Belém Framework of Action. but also in the 3 areas of the GRALE, or the recommendation on adult learning education, we can see that, and we conclude based on the recommendations of the GRALE 4, that actually that participation matters. That participation indeed matters in the adult learning and education to make it or to unlock the potential of adult learning education for individuals, but also for the societies. The GRALE 4, we can see that the main conclusion that we need better data, of course, for adult learning education. We need better data for the participation for all the groups, for the vulnerable groups, for the disadvantaged groups, in order to be able to enhance the provision, in order to be able to actually mobilize the stakeholders in order to...
Oops.
I'm sorry? And in order also to be able to accommodate their needs. As we saw that also AIL remain unfunded. So this also one of the conclusions that we need to increase the investment in adult learning and education. And the donor countries, they have to live up to their obligation to developing countries and to help them to support adult learning and education. It's maybe also it's a good chance from the GRALE to see what are the developments, what are the challenges, what worked and what did not work in order to move for the future. And that we also need to see that the investment of adult learning and education is not a cost, but let's say it's a long-term investment that has also social and civic and economic benefits on the medium term, but also in the long term. And indeed that the intersectorial and interministerial approach and holistic approach that involves all the stakeholders is very much needed in order to unlock the potential of adult learning and education. So all to say that actually that we hope that also this is the way forward to adult learning and education, but we also hope this we need more effective information indeed, and as we said, the finance. And we hope that GRALE 4, it was just like a wake-up call for all of us and give us like an overview how the development of adult learning education and makes us put AIL more in the center of our efforts. And I think GRALE now in this time of the pandemic and maybe even after the pandemic would have a major role to make the adults very active in their societies, to make the societies more resilient, and how to say, to mitigate also the impact of this pandemic if we have adults who are able to be part of the mitigation of the impact. And this, of course, would need adult learning education. So from here, I would stop my presentation and thank you very much for this. And I hope it was useful, and also we'd be happy for any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So if you stop your screen sharing, I will cancel the spotlight video. Now, there's 26 of us left in the room. Some people had to leave and some people had some technical issues. Rather than having a third breakout room with the third question, I would put the third question in the general chat here, and I would invite us for a common discussion on everything that Samah presented, and also with a small focus perhaps on the question number 3, for us all to see one another. Those of us who have decided to share our screen, if you on the top right corner, right next to in the top right corner here, there's either a grid of images or it says gallery view. If you click that, then you will see all the videos of all the participants. All those who have shared their videos will be visible either on this screen or on the next screen, which is you need to swipe to the right. There is on screen number 2 for me, there is Pernille, Marit, and then Niels, and then some people who have decided not to share their names. That's fine, but it makes it hard for me to give you the floor. If my idea and suggestion is here, if you want to use your microphone and comment by audio, you just wave and I can give you the floor. It's a little bit tricky when I don't know your don't see your names here, so I can't point that out. But let's try to see if this works now. So please feel free to either reflect on the third question that Samah put, or comment or ask Samah about the things that she said in the whole of the presentation. Any part you would like to comment on. You can also do this in the chat, but if you would like to use audio, now's the perfect time to do so. So I'm going to switch between screen 1 and screen 2 because I can't see everybody on the one screen. And if I don't notice you, write in the chat, and then I will of course give you the floor. So who would like to start? Who is brave enough to break the ice and throw out the first question? Yes, Pernille, go ahead. Please put on your microphone.
On mute, yeah. Well, can technology play a role in reducing the inequality in GRALE participation? Yeah, I guess it can, but right now we're kind of what I'm thinking from my perspective, where I sit in a language school in Denmark. I'm thinking that we should have educated our students better while we had them physically in the class. We don't have them there now, and those that we can't reach, they are the weaker group with the poor educational background. So next time we get them, I hope we will put in some more effort to teach online skills or digital skills.
Yeah. So you mean it's become very apparent that those who had those skills have had a better chance of participating in online and distance learning, and those with poor skills or lacking digital skills
but it's
have
not
really
just
fallen out. It's like really being a divide between.
There is, but it's not just a question of skills, digital skills. It's perhaps also a question of mindset and studying skills.
Yeah.
So.
Yes. I very much share that sentiment, and Samah, I think you share it too.
I think it's the right question to ask. I mean, it's kind of a very general question to put into one, what do you call it, tool, the digital tool. So maybe I think the fundamental issues for participating or not participating would probably be the same, no matter what kind of tool you have. But maybe you could get more access to some of the knowledge through through digital things. But I mean, if it will decrease the inequality, I think it would be another question you have to ask to answer that.
Yeah, well, if I understood Pernille correctly, you said that it would have been useful to have given people an attitude. It's not just about the tools, it's about a learning attitude. And I used to think that way, but then with the pandemia, we don't have a choice. So it's not about if I want to participate, I have to do it digitally. So that has shifted in my understanding a little bit.
Yeah, well, you have a longer educational background, but if you're an illiterate woman with 4 children at home, and then maybe it's not the first thing you do is to pick up your phone and access the platform that we offer.
Yeah, but then there's a question if that's a question of attitude towards the system, or if that's a question of access and ability to use. Because I used to think it was equally much about attitude, that everybody could use these online tools to use to some good, but it was very much in the mindset. And now I'm beginning to question that. Of course, we are unequal. Yes, I'm privileged. I have an education. I live in a country where communications work. I can do this. So yes, of course, I totally agree with you that it is, for me, it has highlighted the inequalities. Those what we talk about in Finland who have had problems in primary and secondary school with the distance education are certainly those from vulnerable groups. Yes, of course, this has made that very clear. that the digital divide is real. It is not an invented thing. It is very real, and we will see the results and repercussions for a very long time when once we're over this current pandemic situation.
Yeah, but maybe it's an area we will want to focus more on in the future.
Yeah, Maria.
Can I ask another question to the presentation? Because when I see it, what is, if you see it from a UNESCO view perspective, what is, you could say, surprising or especially notable, or because some of the things are very general and we have heard them before? Is it a kind of, that's how it is, it doesn't get much better? Or so what is things you notice when you sit with it in UNESCO from your perspective?
Thank you for the question. And I would say just, I think one of the major things that just we were happy to see that the participation of women increased in a global level. So I think this is in adult learning and education. This is one of the things that I think the positive sign. But on the other hand, also, I think that when it comes, maybe let's say the negative part, that when it comes to citizenship education, we saw that it's very low attention that for citizenship education by many countries all over the world. This is in terms of policy, in terms of quality, and also in terms of participation. So I think this is one of the key points that they were very remarkable. This is in the GRALE 4 report. Of course, as you said, there are some areas, there's not a lot of change happened, but these areas, for example, like the finance of adult learning education, we noticed that actually that the countries did not, many of the countries did not meet their commitment concerning increasing the fund of, or the financing of adult learning education. And I'm assume, as you all know, that the financing of adult education also, it's a very important area to improve the quality, the participation, the provision, the policy. So I would say this was also one of the area that was very remarkable in GRALE 4. Thank you.
May I say something about, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Natalia, and then
I would like to say that, for example, people nowadays, those are also habits we have, people as such. So when you need adult people, for example, or people, let's say, we usually learn when we need something, yes? So, for example, internet, or when you need kind of information, you just put something in, you know, and find something. What is problem nowadays that there is a lot of different information, and the informations are very complex and not always understandable. So people would probably, I think that people, we always have questions. So I would say it, according to technology, we should in some way find the way how could people put their questions or their opinions and use it in a way they need it in their life. This is the question, because the knowledge is not, as we know, something what is written in the books or what is very complex and what, I don't know, scientists find out and learners learn, but it is from constructivistic point of view. It is something what is not very, you know, in order. It is happens and you change all the time. And in this way, I would say we need kind of communication tools, which is somehow put in mobile phone, for example, or smartphones, and that everybody can use it. In this way, I think we should communicate. because nowadays we usually put some programs and says, okay, so this is for, I don't know, uneducated women or illiterate people and so on. So we do not always, the question is, what do I really need? And is or are our programs always somehow have answers for these questions?
Yeah.
So,
Now,
very partial.
Samah said several times that she hopes that this GRALE report is a wake-up call, and it shows and indicates many things that those of us who have worked and read earlier reports will recognize, that there are a few things that changed very quickly. There is insufficient funding, there is insufficient development on many areas, and then there are some progressive, some things that move forward. Now, maybe, and I sometimes think, Natalia, that this pandemia is a wake-up call to show a different kind of world which we were thrown into. You said we learn when we need, and I think perhaps this gives us an opportunity, if we're able to develop new kinds of systems together with the old ones. And Pernille said it's also a question of access and of having no money and of having 4 children screaming at your feet. Yes, that's true. If you look at some of the countries in Africa who are developing super smart solutions for a lot of things using technology, technology is not the solution for everything, but they can skip several steps of the things that others have had to go through. Look at the Industrial Revolution versus the Information Revolution. So it's not easy, and I don't want to be techno-naive, but I do think that we have some opportunities. Now I want to give the floor to Werner, because you indicated you wanted to comment.
Thanks, Johanni. Just 2 points, perhaps I wanted to add to Maria. Maybe that the GRALE report does not necessarily have the most surprising messages, but it gives a kind of differentiated picture. We can see clearer how the situation is in principle, and we can look into country levels. And financing, for instance, remains a key challenge. We know that, but we also have insights to groups of countries knowing better which countries already are relatively good, and we know it more concretely. So I think we already knew that women's participation is in fact increasing, but that's on a large scale. And to see that is a kind of worldwide phenomenon is also encouraging somehow, and is encouraging practitioners as well as policymakers. So it's not always surprising, but there are relevant messages and an overall differentiated picture. I just wanted to add to this discussion how to say somehow what makes us learn, and how to reach, how to do it appropriately. And it reminds me to one of my first projects when we focus on this question, and we thought that the answer is, if we find our capacities to act restricted, we have a drive to learn. And if we see that there is possibilities to enhance our capacities to act, that this is the most driving force. And I think the pandemics offers exactly both parts. Many people see their capacities to act restricted because the situation is as it is, and community learning centers close down, and facilities are not accessible. And at the same time, there is an enhancement of the capacity to act, and community communication possibilities are enhanced. So if there is a combination possibility, I see it really in the situation posed by the pandemics, that many people now, and for us it's certainly true, we are restricted in communicating, but we are also learning, and we find new ways. What we are doing at the moment is we are learning new ways of communication. And so I'm also wondering whether we can reach the now new groups also, the digital natives, for instance. They are so much used to everything. They are swimming like fish in the water in these possibilities, but they can now be better reached, perhaps. And so I think there is a nice situation where capacities to act are restricted and enhanced at the same time. So it could be a marvelous learning opportunity for many groups. So that's what I wanted to share briefly. Thank you.
Yeah, Thank you. I think your point is very well taken, that we should not expect GRALE to come with mind-boggling, explosive, super new things, because it builds on a slow process of things, and some of these issues that GRALE looks at are very complex and will always take a long time to develop. It could also be a lot worse. The GRALE report could also show us lots worse figures, because we see a lot of rising populism that in some cases are also connected to a rise in criticism towards adult learning and other things, which is seen as not essential or not important, etc. I'm not pointing names to fingers to anyone, but I see that the discussion has changed. So it's also for me good to see that there are lots of things going on, and we perhaps have to build on the small incrementations, the small successes, the things that do work. Notwithstanding, this is challenging, and I don't want to wish the pandemic on anyone, and I know that this has created lots of suffering and problems for a lot of people. But that's just a fact. We have to deal with it. That's just the way things are now. So if we take that as an opportunity to some extent, if we're able to, then I hope that we can learn something as well. At least that from this situation, at least that. Thinking about how much this has cost us in terms of learning opportunities, personal life restrictions, everything that Werner just mentioned, and that all of us are currently living under. Now I'm looking at my watch. We have been going on for 1 hour and 20 minutes, and I don't want to keep you longer than necessary, but I also, if you feel, if there are things you still want to share and reflect on, related directly to what we're just talking about, or in general, or if you have questions related to GRALE in general, or UEL, now is a perfect time for you to ask those questions. If you feel that you've had enough, you have to move elsewhere and you got the presentation and you want to go, then that's completely understandable, and then we would say bye-bye to you. But I'm willing to leave this room open in case there are some, in case you want to still exchange something. There's some of us who have been more vocal and others have listened, that's fine. I would invite any of those who have listened but not yet spoken, if you have something to share, please do so. Please feel free to share.
We have shared in the small groups, but I would like to say thank you very much for this webinar. It has been very interesting, and I was here also for curiosity to see how it worked, but I think it has been working very well. I haven't got a picture. That's I will see to it that I have that next time. But thank you for today.
Thank you. I put the Padlet here and I will send it out to all. The same questions as Samah had in her presentation are there in a Padlet, and I encourage you to write your comments and reflections once you have thought about it a little bit longer and further, including if you have issues like what Maria said about the scope, the nature of if the questions are too big and too wide, if they need to be broken down into more particulars, and the questions about progress or non-progress, things like that. We can always learn from discussing the process as well as the contents. That's fine. Some people are dropping off. I'll stop the recording.